Hi, it's Kaylin, and this is my bookshelf. I'm not doing a bookshelf tour, but I am going to do a little haul sort of for you, but I'm not going to grab everything off the shelf because I'm lazy right now. But I want to show you my unread books and what I am planning to read. Now, if you take a look, these first two cubes here underneath all the Funkos, those are my to-be-read books, the ones that I have not read. And the rest of the shelf from those two cubicles down are all books that I have read, except for a few way at the bottom, which are, some of them are kind of journals and some of them are travel books, so I didn't really consider them kind of books to read from cover to cover. They're more kind of like reference books. So what I'm going to do is show you the books on my to-be-read pile, and I have a few little knickknacks here and there and some clothes that you probably don't want to see. But anyway, I will start from left to right and I'll just give you a brief little description. I'll take the books out a little bit and let you know what I have on my shelf. Now, I list my books in order from alphabetical order from A to Z by title. And when I actually read them, they're by genre and then by alphabetical order. But here I just do by title and I don't bother with genres. But the first book I have, without further ado, is Anna and the Swallow Man, and this is by Gabriel Savitt. I've heard such great things about this book. Not for a while now, because it's a few years old now, but I really want to get to it, and I really love the cover. This book, I don't know whether I will read from cover to cover, but this is Back to the Future, Ultimate Visual History. It's by Michael Castorian and Randall Atamanuk or something. I'm sorry. And it has a foreword by Michael J. Fox and a preface by Christopher Lloyd. And it just goes into all behind the scenes stuff and has like pull out things and pictures from behind the scenes of one of the awesomest movies ever made. So I like to pick that up and look at it, but I haven't read a lot of it yet. Bridge to Terabithia. I just bought this recently by Catherine Patterson, not sure. But this is kind of a classic children's book, and I've heard it's good and sad, and I want to read it. The Burgess Boys by Elizabeth Strout. She is the author, obviously, of Olive Kittredge, as it says right on the cover. This is a signed first edition. I think it's like a Barnes & Noble copy. I think it's about some siblings who get together after the death of maybe their father, and they probably dig up family secrets and all that kind of drama. I probably wouldn't have this except that it's signed, so that kind of makes me not want to give it away. And my mom read it. I think I'm not sure if she liked it or not, but the premise sounds good, so I'll probably get into it eventually. A Man Called Ove by Frederick Bachman. And this is supposed to be good. Probably doesn't really need an introduction because it's all over the place. The Double Bind by Chris Bojalian. This is about, I think, a woman or a girl. I don't know if she's a teenager. She goes riding on her bike, and I think she is violently attacked. And then I think she eventually, she withdraws into photography, spending all her time at a homeless shelter. She meets Bobby Crocker, a man with mental illness. I think she forms a relationship, kind of like a platonic relationship with this person. And I'm not sure much more about it than that, but yeah, that's The Double Bind. Next book is, and I'm sorry about my poor camera skills, but this is Drinking, a Love Story by Caroline Knapp. This is a biography about a woman's struggles with drinking and alcohol abuse, and I thought it would be interesting. I've heard really good things about it. I think Peter likes books, has said it's one of his favorite books about alcoholism. And this is The Girls by Emma Cline, kind of like the Manson family book, but fictional. I don't mean the Manson family book. I mean the kind of the story, and it's about a woman, or a young girl actually, who meets these girls, and she's very intrigued by them, and it turns out they have this charismatic leader who they follow, and I guess it's a cult, and I think something horrible is going to happen, which sounds a lot like the actual Manson story. So this book I actually don't intend to read from cover to cover. It's The Green Pharmacy Guide to Healing Foods by James A. Duke, PhD. And it just gives you really good tips about eating healthy, which I really could use because I have a sweet tooth. And so I love sugar. I like healthy food, but I need to be more in the habit of eating it, and I really want to, so I thought this book would help. And I got it at a garage sale for really cheap. So Here, There, and Everywhere. This is a book about basically the top 100 best Beatles songs by Stephen Spignesi and Michael Lewis. And I got this book years ago, and I looked through it, and I highlighted things on a lot of the songs and interesting facts and tidbits I thought were interesting. I think the number one Beatles song on there is A Day in the Life, which is kind of hard to argue with. It's not my number one favorite, but I really like it. So, okay. Next book is In Defense of Food by Michael Pollan. And this is about basically eating and what we should eat, I think. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And he wrote also, the name escapes me right now, I'm sorry. But he writes about health and eating and kind of anti-fast food and things like that. So that's probably a good book to encourage me to eat healthy as well. Next is Jaws by Peter Benchley, which I sadly have not gotten to yet, even though it's summer and summer is almost over, and I thought it would be the perfect summer read. But like I said, I have not gotten to it. I've been reading a lot of other books, so hopefully I can get to it as soon as possible before it gets cold out, which I might not really be in the mood to read it then. So the next book I have is Mindhunter by John Douglas and Mark Olshaker, not sure. And he's basically started the FBI, I believe, with behavior analysis and criminal profiling, and he worked on a lot of famous cases. I think he probably interviewed Charles Manson, maybe Ted Bundy. I think they discuss them. And okay, Green River Killer, Ted Bundy, Ed Gein. And this, obviously, there's a show. I think it's based on this book, Mindhunter, and the show's pretty good. So, A Mother's Reckoning by Sue Klebold. This is the mother of one of the Columbine shooters, and this is her story. And it's probably very, very sad and heartbreaking, but very interesting too. On Bowie, this is a short little kind of biography on David Bowie and his music. And it's so short, I don't know why I never got through it. You can see I'm almost half done with it. But for some reason, I keep picking it up and putting it back down. But I will eventually read it, I hope. We can hope, but who knows. Our Souls at Night by Kent Harif, and there's a Netflix movie based on this book, and it's a pretty short book. I thought it was interesting. It looked interesting. It's about, I think, a man and a woman who are neighbors, perhaps, and they both have lost a spouse, and they kind of seek comfort and solace in each other, and I thought that sounded interesting. And this is Perchance to Dream, Selected Stories by Charles Beaumont. I picked this up because I was doing a podcast with my cousin on the Twilight Zone, and Charles Beaumont wrote a number of stories that became Twilight Zone episodes. So they kind of have that strange, darker element to them. And I like that kind of thing. I've seen every episode of The Twilight Zone and I love it. So I wanted to read his stories. I read the ones that became Twilight Zone episodes. I think there's like 4 or 5, but I haven't read the rest of them, but I want to. So this is Sharing Chagall. I've mentioned this book before. I was at a bookstore and this woman was doing a talk of her book and she signed copies. And so she knew the artist Marc Chagall back in like the 70s, maybe 70s or 80s. He lived to be like in his 90s, I believe. And I really, really like his artwork. So I thought reading about him and about someone who knew him would be very, very cool. So Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel. And this I've heard talked about a lot and I've heard it's really great. I'm going to buddy read this with my boyfriend. And it's about, I think, a girl discovers a giant hand in a hole. And that sounds very strange, but I don't really know much more about it than that, honestly. She discovers a giant hand in a hole. I don't know if it's a robotic hand or some type of creature, but I think the story takes off from there. And there's a sequel, I believe, to this book. The name escapes me. But anyway, and the next book I have is So Many Books, So Little Time, A Year of Passionate Reading. I love books about books, so this will be very interesting. I love just how people just mention all different titles and talk about them, and I can, if I've read them, I can kind of relate and say, oh yeah, I love that book too, or I hated that book, and it's just interesting to see what people like to read and what books kind of stick with them. The Soul of an Octopus, I recently mentioned. I just got this book by Cy Montgomery. And Cy Montgomery is a woman who is, I think, a naturalist. And she went and studied several different octopi. And I've learned that the plural of octopus is octopi. So I will say several different octopi. And she learned they have all different kind of personalities. And they're very intelligent. And there were studies done to just show how amazingly intelligent they are. I'm rather fascinated by octopus. And so I wanted to learn more about them. And this is kind of a fairly short read. So I should be able to get through it fairly quick. And this was a finalist for the National Book Award, and it has a lovely cover, as you can see. Now, Stargirl, I think I got at one of those little free library book boxes. If you have those around your town, check them out because they're awesome. You can get free books. Just read a book and exchange it for a new one that you haven't read. You can find all different kind of books. I have several in my town that I've looked at and periodically go to see if there are any new books in there. And I've found several good books. Some were brand new copies of books, so you never know what you're going to find. And the next book I have is A Three-Dog Life by Abigail Thomas. And I think this is about a woman who loses her husband. I think she kind of is an older woman, maybe in her 60s. Not really sure, but I think she's grieving her husband, and her dogs help her to get through that. And there's a little blurb that says, "The best memoir I have ever read. This book is a punch to the heart. Read it." And that was by Stephen King. So Stephen King apparently really liked this book. And you can see the cover kind of goes to the back, so you can see her 3 dogs, which is really cute. And I love dogs. And so I want to read about it and see what it's about. Dave Ramsey's book, Total Money Makeover. I have read Dave Ramsey's Financial Freedom book, and it really helped me kind of get more organized with my finances and my expenses and creating a budget. I've had a budget for probably 10, 11 years now, and I try to stay basically with it. It doesn't always work that way, but it has helped me a lot to keep track of my money and where it goes. So I think this will be just, if not repetitive from what I've learned, it'll be kind of a good reminder of things I should do to keep my money in track and under control. An Unimaginable Act, Overcoming and Preventing Child Abuse Through Erin's Law by Erin Marin, a 2012 Glamour Woman of the Year. This girl, actually, I read her, she has 2 other books, and I read them years ago. I first saw her on, I think, the Montel Williams show, and she was a young girl who was sexually abused by her cousin, and she and her sister were both abused, and they went on Montel Williams' show, and I was interested and saddened by the story, and they had a book out, or she had written a book based on, actually it was her journal that she had kept during the time she was abused, and so I really, really wanted to read it, so I got it, and it was extremely moving to me, and I followed up with her kind of on Facebook, and she actually went on the Oprah show, and she has kind of ties to my home state, so it's kind of interesting. I've had a little back and forth talk with her over Facebook, and she's a great advocate for just protecting children against child abuse, and this is her latest book, so this is her 3rd book, so I'm looking forward to getting into that. Unlikely Friendships, Dogs. I've talked about this a few times before. Just a bunch of cute stories about dogs and their friendships with other animals. A lot of cute pictures in here. 3 more books here, and we have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. I've heard wonderful things about Shirley Jackson. She's a very famous writer, and this cover is awesome, I think, and it's kind of sort of creepy, but I just kind of like the black and white and the grayscale sketches. I don't even really know what this is about, honestly. I don't know if there's a murder that takes place in this house, or it's about, I think the sister is the main character. But I've heard a lot of people talk about this book, and I would want to read it. So, A Wolf at the Table by Augustine Burroughs. This is a memoir. It says, a memoir of my father. Augustine Burroughs. He wrote Running with Scissors, which I have not read. I haven't read anything by him, but he's a popular writer. And he wrote this book about his father, who's apparently, I guess he was a sociopath. And I don't know if he committed crimes, and I thought, wow, that's kind of fascinating. And so I thought, well, I'm going to learn more about that. And so I picked this up. And the last book I have is Wonder by R.J. Palacio, soon to be a major motion picture. It already has become a movie, as everyone knows, I'm sure. But this is kind of a rough copy, but it was also gotten at, I got it at the book Little Free Library. So this is about a little boy who I guess has a facial disfigurement, and it's a middle grade novel, and it's supposed to be very cute, very good, and inspiring. So that's Wonder, and that's what I have. And actually, I have one more book, but it's not on the shelf because I'm reading it right now, and it's called The Wizard of Oz. You've probably heard of it. I had read it years ago, but I wanted to reread it, and so that's what I'm doing. So that is my to-be-read shelf. I try to keep a limited number of books on my shelf as far as unread books because I don't want to be overwhelmed, and I don't regularly buy books because I am hard on myself about finishing a few first before I allow myself to buy others. And you can see some of my Funko Pops up there, or all of my Funko Pops up there. I kind of got into collecting those a while ago. So anyway, yeah, I don't like to accumulate a lot of books. Right now I have a rule where I allow myself to buy 1 book for every 3 books that I read. So I thought I'd really like to concentrate on making this pile as small as possible. So I figure if I read 3 books and buy 1, that will help me to kind of stay on top of this. So anyway, sorry this is kind of long, but this is my to-be-read bookshelf. And if you've read any of these books or you think I should get to one specifically more than others, let me know. And I hope you enjoyed this. I will be back for another video soon. And thanks for watching. Bye.